The lady boss of the restaurant downstairs is very beautiful. My son loves her cooking. So my husband paid $50,000 US in meal fees at once, enjoying the meals with our son. 3 months later, both were diagnosed with severe fatty liver, and I forbade them from eating downstairs again. My husband said I was unsympathetic. They ran a small business, and she saw single mother. Her daughter and our son are the same age. What's wrong with taking care a bit more? My son also accused me of being dictatorial. Just because mom's cooking isn't tasty, she's jealous of someone else's culinary skills. It just have habit of fatty liver. What's the big deal? Their loathing for me reached an extreme. They even concealed my cancer diagnosis from me, and after my passing, they brought the beautiful restaurant owner and her daughter back home. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the day the restaurant downstairs first opened. I watched my son order honey butter, fried chicken, and cheese bacon. Pizza. A loving lie told him, if you like it, eat more. Dad, and you are so tired from work and study. You deserve to relax. This time, if they wanted to eat, I wouldn't force them to diet anymore. Mom, I want fried chicken and cheese pizza. My son looked at me expectantly, and for a moment, I was lost in thought. My body was pain-free, without those messy tubes, and my nose wasn't filled with the smell of hospital disinfectants, but with the scent of kitchen fumes. It turns out I had been reborn, returning to my senses. I doted on my son, Robert, of course. You and Dad are so tired from work and study. You should eat well. In my past life, because my husband had a family history of high blood pressure and diabetes, and both he and my son were somewhat overweight, I didn't let them order those 2 dishes. Instead, I ordered salmon, rice, and vegetable salad. The result made the father and son unhappy and allowed the small restaurant's owner to take advantage and destroy the family I had worked so hard to build over the years. In this new life, I won't tedious such thankless tasks anymore. If they want to eat, let them eat whatever they want. My son happily said thank you and told the lady boss auntie, we'll take these 2 dishes and add more honey, please. Following my son's gaze, I saw the lady boss named Freya writing down the order. Her bun had come, and one at the back of her head, and strands of hair hung down by her cheeks, some resting on her lips. I looked around. The small shop had only 4 little dining tables, and currently, only our family of 3 was dining. In my past life, I wondered why she would busy. Why put herself in such a state? Now I understand. This kind of deliberately messy hairstyle accentuated her vulnerable beauty. The food was quickly served, rich in oil and heavy sauces, with the distinctive smell of food additives. I had no appetite, but my husband and son praised the food to no end. Freya diligently brought us black tea. After pouring a cup for my husband, Mark, she said, "Sir, how about you add me on Instagram? Friends on Instagram can get a discount." In the past, upon hearing this, I would say we were just trying out the food, and that our family does and they've the habit of eating out. Mark immediately added her and then scolded me for being too serious. It's just Instagram. It's good to help out neighbors. You're grown up and still don't understand social etiquettes. Yes, he stood better under social etiquettes than me, so much so that just a day later, he foolishly prepaid Freya $50,000 in meal fees, with the reason being that our son loved her cooking and it was convenient since the small restaurant was just below our apartment. I was furious and asked him to get the money back. What did he say? The money has been paid. How can I ask for it back now? I'm just concerned about you working in the summer heat and having to cook for us. Father and son, I wanted to lessen your burden. Don't you understand that? Even our normally obedient son, standing by his dad this time. Mom, you diet to fit into nice clothes. You can expect us to eat like rabbits every day. Can you? They saw meds to forget that I was not overweight at all. I ate grass only too. Accompany them, thinking of this. I didn't stop Mark this time. After Mark added her on Instagram, Freya tried to put away her phone. I opened my own Instagram QR code. Let's also add each other. As friends, Freya hesitated. No need. One person in the family is enough. I insisted and held up my phone. Her smile gradually faded, and although she was reluctant in the end, she added me, coming out of the restaurant. I didn't force Mark and my son to run as usual, but went straight upstairs to take Abbott. He also made an appointment for the breast examination. Next day, shortly after returning to the bedroom, Mark came back from his bath. Seeing his body approaching, I knew what he wanted. Well, thinking of how to refuse, his phone suddenly rang. Mark paused for a few seconds before answering. A woman's voice with a sob came through. Mr. Mark, this is Freya. My daughter Erin has a fever. Could you please help me take her to the hospital? Mark coughed uneasily. Seeing that, I kept silent and staring at him. He replied in a low voice, Sorry, I am not really available. You should take a taxi. He hung up the phone hastily, complaining, Wife, don't look at me with that kind of eyes. I didn't even know she would call me. Some people really have no sense of boundaries. He put down his phone, but didn't come over to be intimate again. Instead, he flipped through the book. Absent-minded lie. Suddenly, the sound of our son's footsteps thudded. He even forgot to knock and barged in. Mom, Erin has a fever. Auntie Freya called Dad. Did you tell Dad not to help? I put down the magazine in my hand and asked Robert, Who told you these things? And how do you know Auntie Freya's daughter is sick? My son's work came flustered and glanced at his dad. Mark touched at his nose. I recommended Freya's Instagram to him. Freya wanted her daughter to add Robert on Instagram. They are the same age and could discuss studies, problems with each other. My memories of the last life were still very chaotic in my mind. But one thing I remember clearly, Freya's daughter Erin attended vocational school. And my Robert, he attended the key provincial high school. What could they possibly have in common in terms of their studies? I understood then. From the very first time Freya saw Mark, she had been planning her move. So, when Mark didn't agree to help her, she contacted Robert and even bad. The mouth ed me to him. At this point, my son was already anxious, urging Mark, Dad, hurry up. Mark jumped out of bed, then looked back at me. I raised my hand. Go ahead. It's good to help others. Mark hurried downstairs with our son. Not long after, I saw Freya's post on Instagram. In the photo, her daughter was leaning on the infusion bed, my son holding a can of fruit, and my husband's spoon, feeding the girl with the looks of distress. The caption was 3 words. Feeling blessed. The image was beautiful, but thinking back to lying in my last life, a hospital bed ignored by everyone, I suddenly felt like I had stepped in the puddle of shit. And that shit was runny. Too early the next morning, I went to the hospital on an empty stomach for a check-up. After the results came out, the doctor told me with a serious expression that there was anodule in my left breast, and its shape didn't look too good. It was best to have it removed as soon as possible to prevent cancerous changes. It brought Ed a sigh of relief. There was still a chance for redemption. This was the greatest gift from heaven. I scheduled the surgery for a week later, took leave from my boss at work, and wrapped up my pending tasks. When I get home at 3 p.m., Mark spoke to me sulkily. Why did it wake me up? To go to work when you left? I was late and got caught by the director. That guy is 5 years younger than me, criticizing me as if I'm his grandson. I was so angry that he argued with him. And now I don't even want to go back. Let us see what he can do to me. He sneered, packing my bags. Did you explain to him that the reason you were late was that you were busy playing the Good Samaritan last night, taking someone else's daughter to the hospital? Hearing my sarcasm, Mark read at me irritably. He was about to burst into anger when my son, hearing the commotion, came out of his room. Mom, why didn't I make breakfast when you left? I'm starving. I glanced at him. Mom hasn't that habit to eat since this morning. Either, why don't you boil some eggs to tide us over? My son shrugged. Boiled eggs again? Never mind. I'd rather stay hungry. My heart turned cold. He wouldn't eat, so he would end Cliff Affinger to help me cook one. Either, I grabbed a milk from the kitchen and opened the cupboard to pack some masks into my suitcase, only to find that the dozen boxes of spare masks were gone. Mark scratched his unkempt hair. Erin had a fever and a cough. I was afraid Freya would catch it and not be able to operate her business. Besides, she's in the kitchen every day frying and grilling. The fumes are bad for her lungs. She needs the masks the most. We hardly use them. So I took them to her this morning on my way to work. I was so angry I had to laugh. You were that close with her? You were even late for work, but still thought of delivering masks to her? Mark got defensive. What's with the tone? Are you jealous because she's spreadier than you? Since yesterday, you've been finding fault with her at every turn. With that, he got up in a huff, pushing our son. Let's go. We'll eat downstairs. My son turned around, sighing at me. Mom, why can't you speak as gently as Auntie Freya? Don't be so hostile towards her. You don't know. She actually has a very tough life. It seems that after last night, Freya had organized her indistinguishable truth and fiction story for my son and husband to read. Despite my deep disappointment with them, it was still painful to hear my son speak such words. They could see the struggles of others, but never appreciated my efforts for our family. Never saw my difficulties, even as I was packing. No one asked me what I was doing. The door closed behind them, and at that moment I heard my son ask Mark, Mom hasn't eaten either. Should we call her to join us? Mark responded without a second thought. She doesn't like the food your Auntie Freya makes. Why call her? Let her eat boiled eggs at home. My son hummed in agreement. Yeah, Mom coming would only dampen the mood. I zipped up my luggage fiercely. Boiled eggs. Why should I eat boiled eggs? I also love to eat, but I ate plain lie just to accompany them in their diet. Today, I'm going to have a barbecue. I picked out a restaurant and started the car. And just as I did, a text message for a charge of 50,000 US dollars popped up on my phone. Immediately after, I saw Freya's new post. The picture was of a credit card receipt with a charge of 50,000 US dollars. The last four digits of the card matching Mark's supplementary card that I had given him. Her caption reads, "Good taste like a good woman is always recognized one day." She even tagged Mark. This haste to play the homewrecker, flaunting in my face, made me feel nauseated. Suddenly, I noticed that my son Robert had liked that post. Holding the phone in my hand, I recalled the last life. Because of that 50,000 US dollars, I had a fierce argument with Mark. When our son tried to mediate, I asked him, "Your dad has prepaid your summer tuition, new phone, new sneakers to the restaurant downstairs. What would you do?" My son swore up and down. "Mom, I didn't save to go to tutoring classes. I'll study hard and promise to still be first in class next term." I went, changed my phone or sneakers either. But even though he said that, he often complained about his old phone being too slow. The old sneakers are not supportive enough. It took pity on him and dug into my own pockets to pay for his classes, a new phone and sneakers, which he accepted readily. Thinking of this, I immediately logged into the app and canceled Mark's supplementary card. He's just irregular employees at a company, earnings Abbott over 6,000 amants and never contributed a penny to the family. In over 10 years from today on, he and his ungrateful son, Robert, can live off that 6,000 when I returned home, full and content from the barbecue. Mark was already asleep. He reeked of alcohol, though he used not to drink. Not even at company gatherings when the bosses offered. It seems Freya's charm is indeed very potent. Mark slept as if dead to the world, and I took his phone, opening Instagram. I saw he'd been messaging Freya all day long. He complained about my bad cooking. Freya said, "Not all women can grace the halls and rule the kitchen, but fortunately, we're close by. Mark, if you are not afraid of making your wife mad, you can always come eat here." He vented about me, forcing him and our son to diet. Freya said, "Why the diet? Robert is growing and needs nutrition. Mark, you're not fat at all. Almond should have a bits of a belly to look like a leader." Mark, flattered by her praise, purposely brought up being late for work because of her. Freya said, "To show my gratitude, why don't you and your son come over for dinner tonight? I'll treat you." She rewarded him, and yet he ended up spending 50,000 US dollars? What a joke. The following day, I didn't bring up the matter of the $50,000. However, it was clear Mark felt guilty because of his attitude towards me had significantly improved. Not only that, he started exercising actively with our son. Before, I had to nag them several times each night to go running. Now, they hurried through a quick bite and voluntary lie, geared up to head downstairs. It was peculiar, so I followed them. They didn't go for errand at all, but went straight into the restaurant. After feasting inside, Freya and Aaron came out behind them with basins of water, splashing them to create the illusion of being drenched from a workout. After this charade, they all dispersed, exchanging knowing glances, seeing my son and marked with their bellies round from eating. I was secretly delighted. They loved eating so much. I was all too happy to indulge them. The next evening, I prepared a lavish dinner: roasted lamb ribs, fried chicken legs, smoked fish slices, and even bought a cakes. My son was stunned and asked why I made so much delicious food. I told him, "Mom has to go on a business trips in a few days. For at least a month, I want to improve the food for you and your dad before I leave." Both my son and Mark were excited, not just because of the feast, but mainly because there was no one to stop them from going downstairs to see Freya and her daughter anymore. I went to the kitchen to get some soup and overheard Robert whispering to Mark in the dining room, "Gad, how are we going to eat tonight? If we ray full from eating here, we won't be able to eat at Auntie Freya's, and she's waiting for us. She'll be upset if we don't eat." Mark quietly responded, "Eat like you normally do, otherwise your mom will notice. After we're done here, I'll figure something out." I was curious about what he could possibly do. When they went for their night run, I followed again. To my surprise, they went to the dumpster in the complex. There, the father and son Gus led half a bottles of minerals, water, and then induced vomiting. Listening to the sounds of their retching from the shadows, my grip tightened. They had acquired another bad eating habit. Now, I was truly at ease. Over the next few days, the food at home came richer with each meal. The father and son duo, unable to speak of their discomfort, vomited after eating at my place and then ate again at Freya's. Watching them become increasingly gaunt. I went in for my surgery with a light heart. The post-operative pathology report came back benign. 2 weeks later, I was discharged from the hospital. I arrived home. At dinner time, passing by Freya's shop, I saw it was empty through the window. After eating bland food for 2 weeks, I craved something flavorful and, not wanting to cook, decided to stop in for a bowl of noodles. When Ibish opened the door, no one greeted me. However, from the back partition of the shop, I could hear the sounds of Robert and Aaron playing. Fully squat BB Ling, I walked over slowly and pushed open the door to find a small living room set up with a dining table. Freya and Mark on one side, Robert and Aaron on the other, looking like a family. The table was laden with high sugar, high fat, high cholesterol foods. In just 2 weeks, Mark and Robert had noticeably gained weight, with visible double chins and protruding bellies. Despite the air conditioning, they were still sweating profusely, their hair damp and greasy. At this point in my past life, I had been sent away on a business trip for 3 months, and probably because it supervised them daily calls via video, they were somewhat restrained. But this time around, with me no longer managing them, the father and son indulged freely, and within half a month, they looked like they had in the previous life. After 3 months, my son, struggling to breathe due to his weight gain, looked at the suitcase in my hand in surprise. "Mom, weren't you supposed to be gone for at least Ammon? It's only been half a month." Freya, looking uneasy, stood up and said to Robert, "Maybe your mom's trip was only half Ammon, and she told you Ammon to give you and your dad a surprise." Then, with meaning, she glanced at Mark. Mark suddenly saw Mads too, realized something, and asked me accusingly, "Monica, you set this up to confirm something, right? I have nothing to hide with. Freya, during your absence, it was her taking care of me. And, Robert, you might not be grateful, but could you at least not have such dirty thoughts?" He thought it came to catch him and Freya. I frowned. The conference ended early. What's wrong with me coming home? I just wanted to eat automato pasta dishes passing by here. What's wrong with that? And about the $50,000 for the meal fees. Wasn't it just right for Freya to cook for you too? Why should I be thankful? Mark twitched at the mention of the $5,000, not expecting that I already knew about it. Probably not wanting to Freya, thought he could untaffer it. He kept silent and didn't continue the topic. But my son said to me, "But Mom, Freya didn't prepare your meal today. Maybe you should eat somewhere else?" I was puzzled. Auntie Freya runs a restaurant, so of course, she cooks whatever the customers order. "Do we need a reservation?" My son was about to say something when Freya stopped him. She bit her lip and said, "Sis, if you want to eat, I'll cook it for you." As if humiliated, she went into the kitchen, her daughter helping her. "Monica," Mark started complaining to me, "you always say outside food is unclean. Why bother coming here to have someone serve you?" Now he was using my first name, not even calling me his wife. I was taken aback. She's running a business. Isn't that where the money is made? She can cook for you and your son, for other customers. Why use the word serve when he ordered dishes? As we were talking, Aaron came out with red-rimmed eyes and placed a bowl of noodles in front of me. "Auntie, your noodles." My son asked her, "Where's Auntie Freya?" The girl started crying. My son went into the kitchen, his broad back nearly blocking the doorway. He glanced inside and then told me, "You made them both cry. Are you happy now?" My anger flared. Crying for what? Where have I bullied them? Erin's sobs grew louder as she stammered, "Auntie, don't be mad. It's all my mom's." Robert pulled her behind him protectively, anger directed at me. "Mom, today is Auntie Freya's birthday. This is their family feast. and you just ran over here demanding her to cook noodles for you. Mom, I know you work hard and earn a lot, but do you have to be so condescending and insulting others? Seeing my own son, whom I raised single-handedly, confront me aggressively, I could no longer hold back. I raised my hand and slapped him hard. Robert, you ray a scholar, yet you misuse the term family feast. Have all your studies gone to the dogs? For seeing me slap my son, Mark slammed the table. Monica, have you lost your mind? Freya rushed out from the kitchen, her face streaked with tears. Sis, if you're unsatisfied with something, take it out on me. Dawn bit the child. Erin buried her head in my son's embrace, shivering. Auntie is so scary when she's angry. Witnessing this display of filial piety, I realized that even living to lifetimes, I had been played by Freya. It was the first time Robert had been slapped by me, especially in front of Erin, leaving him both shocked and humiliated, and he began to speak out of turn. Mom, look at yourself. How are you any different from a shrew? Unreasonable and overbearing. You ray not as good as Auntie. Freya, she knows etiquette, and she's beautiful and gentle. No wonder Dad does like coming home. If I had a wife like you, I wouldn't want to come home either. A sharp pain struck my heart. To avoid crying in front of Freya, I grabbed my suitcase and left. As it turned, I noticed some open gift boxes at the door. These were presenting my colleagues prepared for me after they learned of my illness. I was in the hospital then, so I asked them to contact Mark to collect them. They later told me that Mark had directed them to leave the items at Freya's restaurant for storage, unknown street to me. Mark had given all those gifts to Freya. I only then realized that the flowers in Freya's house, the necklace around her neck, Erin's bracelet, and even the bowls and plates on their dining table were all presents from my colleagues. They were meant to cheer me up, chosen carefully according to my preferences. Seeing my gaze lingering on the gift boxes, Robert spoke before I could even ask. Mom, indeed these are yours, but you have so much jewelry. You wouldn't miss these pieces. And with the way you cook, you wouldn't match such beautiful dinnerware. I thought these things suited Auntie Freya better, so I decided to give them to her and Erin. Mom, this has nothing to do with Dad. Don't overthink it. My tears suddenly retreated. I didn't feel like crying anymore. He turned round. Freya was removing her necklace. Sorry, sis. Robert was too enthusiastic. I couldn't refuse him, so I accepted it for now. But I'll take it off and give it back to you. No need. I smiled at her. Those trinkets are not valuable. Since my son thinks they suit you, well, then they're yours to keep. Happy birthday. Freya's expression soured. I pushed the door open, and left under her were wilder gazes. Back home, I went through my savings. For years, I worked myself to the bone, and all the money went into paying off the mortgage and car loans. I only finished paying those off last year, so my savings were substantial. All my bank accounts together held just over $500,000. One originally planned to use this half, $1 million for my son's education, fully supporting his studies to get into his dream university. But now, it sees med points less. He booked at a flight for the next day and called my boss to request an extension of my leave. He was very concerned. Monica, are you okay? Did it too say this afternoon that the nodule was benign? Why suddenly want to travel and see the world? See a boss with no blood relation. To me, was worried about my well-being. Yet my husband and son were concerned about another woman. I assured my boss that I was just tired, and since there was too much work at the moment, I would take a good rest and come back once I recuperated. Mark and my son returned not long after. My son awkwardly approached me, breathing heavily from his obesity. Mom, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I shouldn't have said those things to you. I felt no ripples in my heart, presumably. This was also coached by Freya, simply to create an image of magnanimity in front of them. I remained silent. Mark couldn't contain himself. The boy has apologized. What more do you want? And I haven't had a chance to ask you. Why did you cancel my cart today? What are you trying to do? I looked up, you just noticed today. Oh, after you charged $50,000 at Freya's restaurant, you were cautious not to use the card too frequently to avoid my noticing. So, why did you remember to use it today? Were you looking to buy Freya a birthday gift and realized you didn't save enough on your salary card? And when you tried to use mine, you found out it was canceled? Mark was visibly upset. What do you mean your card? That's our joint property. I chuckled. If it's our joint property, then you shouldn't thinking about spending that money on another woman. Otherwise, it would be quite embarrassing for you if I decided to claim it back on a whim. Wouldn't it? As I continued packing, my son asked, Mom, you just got back. Where are you going now? Going on a trip? I replied. My son sees wide-net in surprise. Mom, you've been away for half a month. Didn't leave any money for Dad and me. And you even canceled the cards. You didn't answer our calls. I thought we really had no money left. And now you still have money to travel? See, that's me, dear son. He didn't. Worried about my safety for half-famine. His first thought was money. Looking at his eyes, narrowed from fatness. I had no desire to deal with him. Suddenly, he changed his tone and started to wheedle. Mom, you didn't enroll me in tutoring. My phone is too slow, and my sneakers are worn out. I cut him off. We already told your dad to use his supplementary card to pay for those things. But since your dad has given all the money to Freya, go ask her for it. His reaction was just like his father's in the previous life. Mom, how can you do this? It's not right to ask for money back once you've given it. If you have money to travel, you can buy these for me. Besides, you'll spend a lot traveling, right? How are Dad and I supposed to live? I let out a louder roar than his Robert. You never got this worked up when your dad prepaid $50,000 to the restaurant downstairs. It thought you were a child who didn't care about money, but it turns out you value it so much. If you like money, ask your dad to find a way. Over the years, your father has never contributed a penny to this household. The house, the car, everything our family uses came from my hard work. Why can't he go on a trip? And why should Illistan too? You pointing fingers at me? Pushing past my son, I dragged my suitcase out the door, driving out of the complex. The headlights flicked across Erin. She was wrapped in the arms of a ugly-looking guy, smoking away, completely devoid of the pitiful air she had in the shopping earlier. I shook my head. 5 Robert, is this the girl you like? Do you know what she's really like? I had flown through several cities, thoroughly enjoying the sunshine and beaches. Throughout this time, I ignored all calls and videos from that father-son duo. They began sending me messages, one after another. Mark claimed that my spending was an attempt to transfer our marital assets, insisting that he would divorce me and demanding half of the money is spent back. I wasn't afraid at all. Since Robert was 3, Mark hadn't contributed a single penny. His annual salary and bonuses averaged $70,000, where the over $800,000 from the past 12 years went. He owed me an explanation. Mark kept mentioning divorce, which I ignored. Then one day, Freya suddenly messaged me, saying that Mark had fallen in love with her and hopped, and I could let go. She used the most cliché line in the world of love. The one who is loved is the third party, addition allies. She sent me numerous photos of Robert and her daughter embracing and cuddling. Robert had gained even more weight. His flesh hung in layers, his neck barely visible. Look, your husband and son are now with me in heart and soul. What can you fight me with? She finally could hold back. This time, I replied to her, Freya, don't try to paint yourself as noble. You fell for Mark because of his money, and you're kind to my son just to win him over. You, never really liked Mark and Robert, have you? If you truly loved them, then let them leave with nothing. If they Ray willing, I'll come back and sign the divorce papers right away, but I bet you won't dare. Also, if you don't mind being called a mistress, I don't mind calling you sister. After all, who we live with doesn't matter. Divorce is too troublesome in a couple of years. When Mark is done playing around, he'll come back anyway. As for Robert, I'm even less worried. He'll always be my son. But if one day he marries your daughter, you might even have the honor of him calling you mom. Freya went silent, and imagining her shaking with rage gave me a chuckle. I knew Mark too well. He would never tell Freya that the house, the car, and the money were all earned by me. If she really had any foresight, she would urge Mark to leave with nothing. From what I'd observed of Freya recently, I felt she really could do it. As expected, she made her move. She was increasingly kind to my son and Mark, constantly posting about the happy family of theirs. For online, apart from the high-calorie food she flaunted, the rest of her posts were quite bizarre. When Robert didn't want to study, she deliberately spilled coffee on his homework, captioning, "It's not that I didn't want to do homework. It is coffee that won't let me." When Mark had a falling out with the young director, she supported him not going to work, posting, "Amen at home is the most attractive and gives the most sense of security." Eventually, Mark called me. He wanted a divorce, and he was willing to leave with nothing. But he had one condition. Robert would stay with him. I was clear on why Mark and Freya wanted to keep Robert by their side. He was already 16, almost an adult, and needed little care. Moreover, Robert had always excelled academically, ranking first in his class, and he loved studying. A bit of effort would get him into a top university. Holding on to Robert meant securing Aaron's future. I was more than happy to get rid of the brat and immediately flew back to finalize the divorce. The day I arrived, I hurried to the Civil Affairs Bureau to file for divorce just before closing time. Annoying lie, there was a 30-day cooling off period to prevent him from changing his mind. I made it a point to dine and cause trouble at Freya's shop daily, portraying myself as a accomplished shrew in stark contrast to Freya's soft and tender demeanor. I figured even if Mark's grandmother begged from her grave, he wouldn't agree to reconcile with me. What I hadn't anticipated, though, was that the divorce wouldn't go through because Mark died before the 30 days were up. Dead in Freya's restaurant, they said on that day. A man barged in while they were dining. It was Freya's ex-husband, who accused Mark of seducing his wife and beat him senseless. Mark, once a strong player on his college basketball team, had long forgotten his moves due 2 years of inactivities and the extra 50 pounds he put on recently. He didn't stand a chance. Later, at a hospital, the doctors found that it wasn't beating that killed him. He died of a cerebral hemorrhage. Due to his family history, his current conditions of hypertension, hyperglycemia, and hyperlipidemia, the alcohol he drank that day, and his agitated emotions, Mark's death was certainly connected to Freya's sex, who, penniless and indebted, couldn't make any compensation. The good news, however, was that the sexed husband of Freya Shad never actually processed their divorce. he set Freya up with the high-end restaurant in hopes that she would hook a wealthy man to support their family. In my previous life, it was this same man who repeated, like, caused trouble asking for money, prompting Freya to consider selling the shop. But before she left, she didn't forget to spite me by convincing Mark and my son that I was the one causing her trouble. Freya didn't save much money, but her little shop was still worth something. Later, crying, she begged me to let her keep the shop, willing to sign an IOU for me. In the end, we struck a deal. Her ex would do 3 years, and she dragged me an IOU for 200,000. Not much for the likes of Mark, but for him, 200,000 was already a steep price. After Mark's death, Robert wouldn't speak a word to me, acting as if I had caused his father's demise. He treated Freya's place like home and mine like a hostel. Many times after work, I saw him standing outside the restaurant, grilling skewers to sell. I suddenly stood under why he resented me so much. He must think he's working to repay the 200,000 that Freya owed me because of his father's death. If I given up the claim, he wouldn't have to suffer. But I refused. Another semester passed, and Robert's teachers called me, and his grades had plummeted, ranking him middle class at best. The teacher was shocked. Robert's mom, he kept asking me to talk to his dad about his school issues, but there was no improvement. Now that his dad's gone, I can only contact you. Robert is the first student I've seen to fall so far academically. Also, during today's school physical, he was over 60 pounds overweight and already suffering from all 3 highs conditions despite being underage. With off-the-chart transaminases, I promised the teacher I'd talk to Robert, but he wouldn't give me the chance. Eventually, I let it go. After all, in my past life, when I had breast cancer, neither he nor his father, out of spite, told me to get treated at IRIC on the class. Teacher couldn't bear to see Robert's Declan, as he visibly slimmed down over the winter break. Yet, his temperament grew increasingly irritable, and he often suffered from insomnia. I checked Freya's social feed and found she was preparing a slimming nutrition menu for my son. It was basically low-fat high protein, with plenty of vegetables, no different from what I used to make for the kids. I had my BTS. How could such a diet be so effective? My question was soon answered. One day, Robert's teacher suddenly called to say he had fainted in class. I rushed to the hospital where Robert was being resuscitated. The doctor told me his liver and kidney functions were failing, and his condition was very critical. In desperation, I asked the doctor why this was happening. From the test results, the doctor said, it seems to be due to long-term medication use, but we haven't determined exactly which drug yet. My thoughts immediately turned to his recent rapid weight loss, and I reported it to the police. When the police took Freya from the small restaurant, Robert's test results also came in. The damage to his liver and kidneys was caused by banned substances in weight loss drugs. These drugs are not only harms the liver and kidneys, but also the heart and brain. After a concerted efforts, the doctors finally pulled my son back from the brink of death. Seeing Robert barely hanging on in the hospital bed, I was overcome with remorse, my resentment from the previous life. Disparating at the police station, Freya confessed quickly. She admitted to secretly administering drugs in his meals, hoping to accelerate his weight loss. However, given the pre-existing grievances between our two families, the police didn't close the case hastily. They dug deeper and uncovered that Freya had intentions. A lie poisoned him. She hadn't gained any advantage from Mark or Robert. Instead of ending up owing 200,000, she knew her husband well. Once his 3-year sentence was up, he would seek revenge no matter where she hid. Thus, she harbored resentment towards me and towards Robert, but this outcome was something the revived Robert couldn't accept. He insisted that I had bribed the police to frame Freya, accusing them of imposing serious charges on her. Deliberately, his face darkened with anger, spewing the most venomous language at me. "Monica, do you want to kill Aunt Freya? Who do you think you are in this world? You are the one who deserves to die the most. If it weren't for you, we could have been living a happy life as a family of 4. You've always been so domineering, trying to control other people, slaves. In the past, you forced me and Dad to eat healthy meals and run every day to control our weight. As soon as we found a little happiness downstairs, you stirred up trouble and ran away from home. Even Aaron's demonic father, it was you who brought him back, wasn't it? You caused his death, and now you want to kill Aunt Freya too?" I was dumbfounded. "Robert, did Freya tell you all this? Can't you see that you've been brainwashed?" Robert was breathing heavily with anger. "I'm not stupid. It's all your fault. If you hadn't, he forced the teacher to talk to me, pushing me to lose weight. Would Aunt Freya have been so anxious to medicate me? She did it for my good. Why did you say she deliberately hurt me?" Elad, it turns out I was a joke. I had forgiven him for his actions in the previous life. Yet here he was, making me resent him all over again. Nonetheless, being his mother, I still paid enough for his medical treatment and told him our relationship as mother and son was over. But it never anticipated that not only was our relationship over, but his connection to this world was too. A month later, he was discharged from the hospital and rushed to find Aaron. But in the back room of the small restaurant, he found her in a disheveled state, entangled with a young man claiming to be her boyfriend. Robert refused to believe it. They fought, and Robert just out of the hospital. There was no match. Aaron had someone throw him out, kicking him in the face as she did. "You raised such bad luck. I've never loved you. This is my boyfriend." Words of advice: stay away from me. The doctor called me again. By the time I get to the hospital, Robert was in a deep coma. The doctor said he had been brought in due to injuries ahead, and then he got so angry that his heart disease flared up and his blood vessels burst. There was no value in trying to save him. I asked the doctor if he had left any words before he lost consciousness. He kept calling for his mother, saying, "Mom, I was wrong." As soon as the doctor finished speaking, as if his conscience was clear, Robert stopped breathing. I hugged him and whispered, "But Mom, doesn't he want to forgive you?" "My dear,